Welcome, everyone. My name is Rabbi Shosh Dvorsky. I served as the rabbi here in Eau Claire for 10 years and am honored, saddened, but greatly honored to be back to accompany Sue on the last leg of her life's journey. We're going to begin our service with Sue's daughter, Deb, who is also a rabbi.
Adonai ma'adam v'teda'ehu ben enosh v'techashvehu Adam la'hegel tama yamav k'tzel over בבוקר יציץ וחלב, לערב ימלל ויבש, תשב אנוש עד דקה, ותאמר שוב Eternal One, what are mortals that you take notice of us? Human beings that you think about us. Human beings are like a shadow or a breath or a vapor. Our days are like a passing cloud, a passing shadow. In the morning we flourish, in the evening we wither. We remain only a moment, and then you say, "Come home, human beings."
To begin eulogizing Sue, I'm going to recite the chapter from Proverbs called Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. And I hope that in every line, or in most lines, or in many lines, despite the rather patriarchal nature of these verses, and Sue's feisty feminism, nonetheless, I hope that you will hear her in these lines. A woman of valor who can find her price is beyond rubies. The heart of her husband safely trusts in her. She does him good and evil all the days of her life. And good and not evil. All the days of her life. There was one story from someone on our family and friend Zoom call yesterday who referred to your dad as grumbling sometimes. But nonetheless, she did him a lot of good. She seeks wool and flax and works willingly with her hands. She's like the merchant ship. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and gives food to her household. She considered a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She girds her loins with strength. Her arms are strong. She sells her merchandise. Her lamp goes out not by night. She lays her hands to the distaff and the spindle and weaves. She stretches out her hand to the poor. She reaches forth her hands to the needy. She's not afraid of the weather. All her household is clothed in scarlet and linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the future. She opens her mouth with wisdom The law of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and eats not the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband, were he here, would also praise her. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you, Sue, rise above them all. Grace is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a righteous woman, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. That was written for Sue in many ways. Her candle did not go out at night, and she sought the welfare of so many people. Sue was a people person and a social justice person. She cared about humanity, and it occupied her day and night all of her days. Friends, we are here to honor and remember and mourn and celebrate the life of Suzanne Rose Gordon, Sarah Rachel Bar Yosef Abba Reza Henna. She was born October 16th, 1936 in Duluth and died this past September 13th, Erev Shabbat, an auspicious time to leave this world, the 10th of Elul, the month of Elul 5784, here in Eau Claire at the River Pines Nursing Home, where she had been living recently, cared for on this last leg of her life journey by loving family, staff, and by her treasured visiting angel, Nancy. Sue is survived by her sister Janet, daughters Deborah, Lisa, and Adina, all here today, grandchildren John, Jacob, Josh, and Rose. 3 of you are here today. Brothers and sisters-in-law, nieces, nephews, many cousins and friends. Sue loved connecting with people, made connections, and stayed connected. Stories and memories have been sent to the family from lifelong friends from distant places. She was a people person and a smart, honest, opinionated, inquisitive, lifelong learner and activist, dedicated at every step of her life to community engagement and the pursuit of social justice. It is fitting that last week's Torah portion from Kitetse, the week during which Sue passed away, that we read the famous commandment, justice, justice shall you pursue. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdov. Sue did that in spades. Pursuing justice was not just something Sue did, it was who she was. Sue was born to Robert and Ruth Karen, both of Duluth Superior. Both Sue's parents came from large families, so she and her sister grew up surrounded by 50 plus cousins. And since one of her mom's sisters married one of her dad's brothers, Sue was blessed with what she called double cousins. It was a true village. When Sue married Dave Gordon of Minneapolis, Dave brought more cousins into her life, and the two clans were and still are interwoven. And Sue's large heart had room for all of them. Part of Sue's growing up included attending Jewish summer camp, Herzl Camp here in Wisconsin, and Dave, her future husband, attended it at the same time. So they met there as youngsters, but Sue always insisted that meeting didn't count. Rather, it was later as young adults when they met at a B'nai B'rith event, that time counted. And they married in 1959. But their shared Herzl Camp experience was an important part of their story. When as adults, Sue and Dave visited Dave's sister and family in Israel, and these cousins were on a Zoom call with us yesterday. That's where I've learned these stories firsthand. They visited Dave's sister and family in Israel, and they all went on a tiyul, a trip to the north of Israel, a place in Israel right now where one does not go on a tiyul because of the missiles falling. But then they went, and Dave and Sue, looking at the itinerary of that trip, recognized all the names of the towns. Why? Because they were the names of their bunks at Camp Herzl. So even though the meeting at Herzl as youngsters in Sue's mind didn't count, it was part of their shared experience and reflected their shared commitment to not just to family, but to Judaism and the Jewish people. Sue attended the University of Michigan, Madison. I'm sorry, that can't be right. Ann Arbor. Okay. Where she majored in sociology and sang in the opera choir. Not always knew how much Sue loved music. She loved opera. She made sure all her kids had music lessons. Eventually, she would transcribe some of Dave's father's high holiday melodies. She even composed. At River Pines, she would attend the Lutheran services just for the singing. And she was known to say, "God bless the Lutherans." Though Deb also added, her daughter Deb also added that Sue wanted to be in worship settings, and it didn't always matter what flavor. She was a spiritual seeker. Sue and Dave moved from Madison to Evanston, where Sue got her MSW, social work degree, master's. Among her many endeavors and accomplishments, she worked for some years at the Illinois Jewish Family and Children's Services and served on the Human Rights Commission. A people person, as I have said, and a passionate pursuer of social justice. Lisa's earliest memory, her daughter Lisa's earliest memory of her mother, Lisa was just a toddler, but she remembers her mother standing in the street, yelling at somebody really passionately and angrily, arguing for racial justice, and saying it made no difference to her what color people were. She didn't care if they were purple with pink polka dots. That was all she cared about. And Lisa at the time did not understand the content, but the emotion and the passion. And later in life, they came to connect the content of what was going on there and the passion your mother felt and her values. Sue and Dave raised their 3 girls in Madison, Evanston, Boston, Miami. Should I include Eau Claire, or were you grown up by then? Yeah. And Sue made lasting connections with people in all of those places and sustained those connections. You would not believe the messages coming in from people from all stages of her life and all far-flung locations. And perhaps the multitude of relocations fit with Sue and Dave's passion for travel, meeting new people, adventure. Sue had a can-do attitude to life. How many people have said that in the interviews and emails? She looked at new challenges straight in the eye. She was broad-minded. For example, she accepted her daughter Deb marrying a woman back in the 80s, right from the beginning, and she was perhaps ahead of her time. And I want to interject here the personal here, because I had a relationship with your mother for 10 years as the rabbi. And I often felt like she reminded me of my own mother, because we also, the first person to come out in our family in the 80s, when it was, people weren't so aware of same-sex relationships. My mother didn't bat an eyelash. And so I felt that same energy in Sue, hearing about her toasting your wedding when other mothers might have been uncomfortable. Both of our mothers were women of valor. And there was one more connection with my own mother, in that both women were unpretentious and down to earth in their homemaking, in other ways, but in their homemaking. I learned yesterday that Sue loved to say, "My home is clean enough to be healthy, but dirty enough to be happy." And in the kitchen I grew up in, there was a little sign that said, "Dull people have immaculate houses." So our moms had much in common. And while mine has been gone 20 years, her yard site was just 2 days ago. So she and Sue exited this world at the same time on the Jewish calendar. Both in the holy month of Elul. We are in the Jewish month of Elul, the month leading up to Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. And that name of the Hebrew month Elul, the acronym is said to signify Ani ledodi v'dodi li. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. These are 2 loving and beloved women. Sue and Dave are the proud grandparents of Josh, John, Rose, and Jacob, three of you who are here today. With the arrival of grandchildren, apparently Dave was worried that because of his age, he wouldn't be able to play with you. But Can-Do Sue had no fears. And I want the four of you to know how proud and full of love she was for all of you. Anyone at Temple Shalom here in Eau Claire who knew Sue knew about you guys. And now from your mom, I've learned about your family gatherings in Vermont at the Trapp Family Lodge, as it was called, the timeshare where the family would gather every year. But so many other family gatherings and outings to, what do you call it, water parks. And wherever she took you, according to your mom, she wanted you to have fun. Indeed, so many stories I've heard from family and friends are about Sue or about family gatherings. She and Dave hosted long seders, sukkah celebrations, and traveled, some of it for Dave's work, but Sue taking advantage of the opportunities to travel, to learn and connect with people. She built meaningful and lasting connection as part of those trips. And then going back to the timeshare in Vermont where the extended family would gather, that timeshare was legendary, it seems like, in the family. And Sue's cooking. She loved to cook. So many people in her family learned to cook, especially bake, at her feet. And anyone who attended a potluck here at Temple Shalom, most of us have at one point or another asked Sue for her recipes. Nancy, her caregiver, who is not Jewish, learned Jewish cooking from Sue to make matzo ball soup and simmus and other things. And Nancy was nervous about it because it was all new to her, but Sue gave her the message, it's okay. You can make mistakes, we can always redo it. It can always be fixed. That was the comment, that was down to earth and caring and compassionate Sue. A teacher and a community builder at the same time, a bridge builder. This broad-mindedness of Sue's to people of other faiths found expression in her commitment here in Eau Claire to interfaith work, to multi-faith work. Trialogue, are there people here from Trialogue? Trialogue meaning Jewish, Christian, Muslim. Sue is well known at the Altoona Mosque, and its members are well known here at Temple Shalom. She and Dr. Mahmoud Tamam, is he here?
He passed away a long time ago.
May his memory be blessed. It's Sadie that told me that, another member of that community that told me that they started working together. And they were pivotal in getting the temple and the mosque together to work at the community table for Easter every year. She was always serving the Eau Claire community, active in politics, Democrat, I must say, teaching ESL as a later in life endeavor, taking on new challenges. And she learned to read, speaking of new challenges, she learned to read Torah at the age of 60. For those of you who are not Jewish, that is something that often people learn either before their age 13 or never. And I learned at age 30 and I thought I had a great story. Well, Sue learned at age 60. She was always up for a new challenge. She attended exercise classes even as her body became frailer, saying, I don't do everything, but I do what I can. That's her, honest and determined. Temple Shalom was a central commitment of both Dave and Sue since they settled here in Eau Claire in 1997. To say they were pillars of this community is such an understatement. Not just that Sue served on the board and contributed financially, she was present at every service and event, kiddush and celebration with joy. She took so much pleasure in Jewish observance and study and celebration and food, as I've mentioned. Rabbi Yossi Gordon, who was the rabbi here for many years before me, said, please remember Sue and Dave. If you're a Temple Shalom veteran, you could never forget them. But if you are newer to the community, honor them by continuing their work, their hours of dedicated support, their passion and their very presence, which brought us dignity, beauty, and Jewish richness. Sue had health challenges in her life, which she faced bravely and to which she adapted. Her health took a turn in 2022 when, because of a fall, she sought out assisted living. It was necessary. She complained of Dave's stubbornness in not wanting to live in assisted living. That was Sue, not afraid to share. I felt honored when she complained to me. But eventually Dave's health made it imperative that he too seek care, and they lived briefly together at River Pines before Dave's death. Dave's unveiling was Memorial Day of this past year. At that point, Sue had received a diagnosis of ovarian cancer, which she did not want to be treated, and she also did not want people to know about before Dave's unveiling, lest they take attention away from him. She died peacefully in the wee hours of Erev Shabbat, Friday, September 13th and 10th of Elul, surrounded by or in close contact with her beloved family caregiver. A true Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor who pursued justice and inspired others to do so as well with every breath. May her memory bring only blessing. I'm just going to share a couple of words shared by a former student of Dave's, and I hope you do not blush, but Sue and your dad, this is written to the children, were a great team, that it might not be a surprise they left this world just a year apart. We haven't been back in Eau Claire this summer, but we thought about Sue often. For example, when we chose our tickets this fall to the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, which we loved sharing with Dave and Sue, and we were able to stop and see her at the nursing home twice in the past year. She seemed happy to have the company, and though she was no longer able-bodied, her mind was as clear and feisty as ever, and boy, can I corroborate that. When we saw her last fall, she was particularly upset over the October 7th attack on Israel and over the civilian carnage in Gaza. She could always be counted on to see and question all the sides of any issue. And I know this so well from all the Torah study sessions that she attended with me. Dave wasn't joking when he called her his better half, although he was sometimes grumbling. We sat behind them a couple of times in the Tunnel of Love at the Minnesota State Fair. They loved the State Fair. They threatened to tip over at first, but get ready, their smooches in the dark and eye gazing in the emerging light left us blushing. When Sue went into the light this week, I'm sure Dave was there waiting with outstretched hands and an editorial to print. I shared some of Yossi Gordon's words already. Yossi stayed in touch with Sue even long after he was serving here as the rabbi. Sue was never the flatterer. She could be both blunt, but also accepting, direct, and welcoming. She had both feet planted on the ground. Whatever the topic, world affairs or the family clan, Jewish values or synagogue squabbles, you never had to guess what Sue thought. She had a sense of right and wrong, of the important and the trivial. And as Yossi said, she was so dedicated to this community. The only community activity I did not mention, but it is one of the two organizations to which memorial donations are requested, to the temple, but also to Jonah. Are there people here who are active in Jonah or work with Sue in Jonah? Jonah is the local interfaith social justice organization. I don't think I was here one Shabbat when she didn't make an announcement about a Jonah event. So strength to you who carried on the work without her, and may others join you from this community. I'm going to turn over the pulpit to Sue's daughter-in-law, Judy, for a moment, so please.
Well, good morning. Thank you all for being here. I volunteered to do this because it seemed to me it would be one of the few times where I could speak without being interrupted in a room with this many Gordons. Sue and David were married for over 60 years. Any of you who have been with someone for close to that length of time have a clear understanding of how your personalities both blend and separate. It's a little like a decent vinaigrette. If you don't shake it up now and again, it doesn't blend very well. If you do shake it up too much, it doesn't separate very well. I always said that Sue and David reminded me of my own parents because they were simultaneously the most loving, generous, and difficult people I knew. And I will say without reservation that I know how much they loved each other, and I know how much they loved their children and their grandchildren and their cousins and their in-laws and the other cousins and those other cousins and these other cousins. Deb and I were on a trip to Israel. And we were it was a scholastic trip. It was an academic kind of a trip. And I think we were on a bus with maybe 15 other people who were on the trip. There were 4 of us, maybe 5, my numbers are not good, 4 or 5 of us from the United States. I was there. Deb was there. A young woman who had attended college with Lisa was there. Yeah, really. And the woman who was Sue's boss in Boston, where she worked for Jewish and Family Services, was also on the bus. As it happened, we were all 4 of us sitting, for whatever reason, in the back of the bus. And I don't remember we ever all sat together again once we figured all of that out. I will tell you, in the 25 years that Deb and I have been together, it's rare for us to be able to go anywhere and not find a Gordon or a Karen or a cousin. It's an enormous family. It's a loving family. It's a family has put in the energy, and I know how much energy it takes, to stay in touch, to talk to each other, to make sure somebody knows something about everybody in a kind way. This is not a family that indulges in gossip. This is a family, not that it never happens, but this is a family who clearly has a kind desire to find out what's going on, in case you might need something, in case they can help, in case you need a bracha said for you. They do those kinds of things. Now, some of you may think that I may have sort of, iced the cake a little, said things that you may not recognize as being part of the Gordon Karen clan. And what I can tell you is, because I'm a family therapist, there are very, very loving and caring families, and none of us is without some friction and some rough edges in our lives. So, having said that, I want to encourage all of you when we meet later for the Shiva to share your stories, especially of Sue. But also, if you remember them, of David. I'm sure David had an editorial. I'm also reasonably certain that Sue may have edited it. For length, if nothing else. But again, I want to thank you for being here. It's a real testimony to the Gordons that you're here and that you're honoring Sue today. Thank you.
Please join me together in reading the 23rd Psalm, which is on your handout. A Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I lack nothing. In green pastures God lays me down, and by still waters guides me. My soul is renewed. God leads me on the paths of righteousness for the sake of God's name. Lo, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You set a table before me against my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and loving kindness follow me all the days of my life, that I might dwell in God's house for all my days. Shortly, we are going to leave the sanctuary and process to the cemetery, after which there is a meal of comfort at, remind me the name, Bijou Bistro, to which everyone is invited. What we just recited, the 23rd Psalms. Psalms are an important part of a Jewish funeral. When we get to the cemetery, and we take Sue out of the hearse and walk with her to the grave, it is appropriate to recite Psalms. I will probably be singing this one, The Lord is my shepherd, but you're welcome to recite it. And then when we are leaving the cemetery, just to prepare you, if you've never been at a Jewish funeral, once we've covered Sue with dirt and the burial is over, we will form two lines facing each other, sort of like in a square dance, and allow the mourners, in this case the daughters and spouses and grandchildren, and Nancy, to walk through that line, and it's a chance for you to offer words of comfort. The traditional words of comfort are may God comfort you among all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. It's a broad blessing. It's taking away a little bit of the particularness of your loss. It's not just your mother. There is much grief and mourning in the world. So as searing as this loss is to you personally right now, you're not alone in grief. And we are always, as Jews, trying to balance that personal and the communal. So that's some of the choreography that will happen momentarily. Also, it is traditional to wash your hands when you leave a cemetery, and so there will be a bucket of water. I think that is all the details. There will be a Shiva gathering tonight and tomorrow night at River Pines. I have the times right here. That means that you may come and offer condolences to the family and also share stories at the community room at River Pines Nursing Home. That's the community room at River Pines Nursing Home. That's 206 North Wilson in Altoona. There will be a short service at 7, and all are welcome. Enter the nursing home from the front. This is in the obituary, so you can find the instructions. So that's tonight and tomorrow night. We'll conclude this part of our service with Rabbi Deb chanting El Moleh. So I'm going to ask you all to rise. This is also on your sheet, so you can follow along. Let's do Deb will transfer us.
It's the end of an era for Gordon's in Eau Claire. Our family thanks everyone who made this, our parents' Jewish home, journalistic home, social action home. Thank you for being here, not just now, but for the past 27 years that they've lived here. And for some of you, all of their lives or all of your lives. God, full of compassion, dwelling in the heights, grant perfect rest beneath the wings of your presence. In the heights of the holy and pure who have gone to their eternal home, to the soul of Suzanne Rose Gordon, who has gone to her eternity. Master of mercy, shelter her in the shadow of your wings. And may her soul be bound up in the bond of life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And we say Amen.
Amen.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochen במרומים, המצא לך נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה. מעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מסירים, את נשמת שרה רחל בת יוסף אבא ורזהנה, שהלכה לעולמה. בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה. אנא בעל רחמים, אז תיראה בשאת כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים, את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתם, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה.
At this time, this concludes our service here at the Temple Shalom. We will be processing out to the B'nai B'rith Cemetery. For those of you that are following us out in the procession, if you could have your brights and your hazard lights on, just that way I know who to come flag. Following the burial at the B'nai B'rith Cemetery, again, the family will be inviting you all for a small gathering at the Bijou Bistro. Thank you all, and go in peace.
you.